new mangas happen all the time. Like we get a good handful every year, and then there's the question of which ones survive. When we get brand new mangaka, you know, there's always that really exciting feeling of not only obviously something new, but from a person we don't know. Like, what can this person bring? It's like, you know, and then there's like Fujimoto when he got Chainsaw Man. I knew it was going to be crazy because I've, you know, I read Fire Punch, and then, well, I'm not finished on Fire Punch. I got to finish it eventually before someone tries to call me out on that. But there's all these different feelings, obviously, when something new starts, and when you're a fan of the creator already, I think it puts such an extra big spice of excitement on it. And I loved Toriko. I thought Toriko was so much fun to read. The world was amazing. It was such a great action-packed adventure while at the same time you really had to understand the world itself to really kind of get how it is the way it is. But also you have to get immersed in the world to really understand the way that the world is kind of centered around. And what I mean by that is, it's not like when you have all these other series where you know, you have the concept that, you know, of what the setting is. So, you know, you look at something like Fairy Tail, Eden Zero, Black Clover, One Piece, Naruto. Like, you have a theme, like Fairy Tail wizards and, you know, their magic. One Piece has pirates and the Marines. Naruto obviously ninjas and, you know, demons and stuff, while chakra monsters. But you know what I mean? There's a theme that they all center around, but it's way easier to get in that setting just off like, oh, it's, you know, these types of kind of like the cultures and settings, you know, oh, wizards, pirates. You don't really see that in something like as strange as carpentry. And then the ideas behind it, again, have these very basic yet understandable things you can kind of grasp. Like with Toriko, it was all about, you know, for the most part, food. Like, it was more complicated than that, but you could really look at it in like food and whatnot and cooking. And then really when you go into like the idea of the staple things that people need, food, like, oh, well, what about food in this world where all these crazy monsters? You still need to capture food, so when you have super powerful people involved that have to capture and defeat these horrendously gigantic and strong monsters, it makes for a really fun series. And then when you have something like Build King already, again, you have to look at it and be like, that's about building? Well, how do you have a series about building? And then you have to understand the world. You know, okay, they're in this world of calamity and crazy catastrophes and monsters all over the place. Where do people feel the most safe? Where are they going to find the security of not being, you know, in danger of this insane outside world? Your home. Like, your home is obviously just supposed to be the place where you feel the most safe. So having these homes, like crazy indestructible almost buildings, to resist the calamities and despairs of reality makes a lot of sense. And it's not like reality of like you're just trying to hide away from, you know, the truth of like stuff going on, or, you know, some horrible secret that, you know, it's coming out, or some form of more of like, maybe it could be in your head, or it's more in like a, you know, maybe like just don't like people, could be like a hermit or something. But when it's literally, there's monsters everywhere and tornadoes and volcanoes going off at all the time, and you have to have like characters make houses to essentially fight back against Mother Nature, it makes a really cool world, because then you have to think of like, what are the characters that have to withstand these catastrophes? What do they have to be capable of to even build these houses? And like, where are they getting the material to build these houses? Because they would have to obviously get like absurdly rare and powerful materials in order to construct these, you know, these buildings and houses. And again, I think that's really cool. And on top of that, when you have a series that has a very, very large scale strange premise that you have to get immersed in, I think, more than others to really grasp. Like, look at something like Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think anybody who's not a fan of the series can look at like a world where it's like they settle almost everything with card games, and card games, you know, they pretty much take over their life and like as our major staple of society. Yeah, it sounds crazy, but when you get into it and you really understand like how things got to the way they are, you understand how it integrates into, you know, their everyday lives, it just makes it a lot cooler, and it makes it a lot more fun when you have to really understand the world to get the most out of it. And that's one of the things I really like, you know, about very Odd Turn series. Again, something like this. They're not the same series, but when you compare something, it's like, oh, a series based around a card game and people fighting in a card game, or like people building houses and, you know, dealing with calamities that come from these houses and stuff. It's strange, but it's in enough of a way that it's intriguing, but also it has such a charm to it that I think is, again, really fun. So this series, I knew for a fact that I was gonna like I knew I was gonna like it as long as it wasn't super silly, because the thing about Shimabukuro, if you checked out his series, he'll have ones that are overly, like, very gag based, like very silly. Like, he did a one shot where it's like this guy was like one of the, I think he was the most powerful martial artist on the planet, and he mastered the art of pinching, to where like he could stop an earthquake by pinching the planet. And it was like, oh, that's cool, but it's way more goofy and silly. Where it's like Toriko had some silliness in there, but it was like how most shonen are, where it's like you'll have goofiness, but you'll still have serious plot and, you know, action and adventure, and you still had to pay attention. It's not like, say, what's that one series that's going around? Oh, that Roboco, that's clearly a very goofy, very fun kind of gag series. It's like you would get like the gap between that and then something, you know, any normal shonen where it's like, yeah, it still has a story. You still have to, you know, take it seriously and still have to kind of go along it like you would, you know, any of these other ones. But obviously, you know what I mean? Like the gap between one that's like just silly. You could miss something and it's probably not going to be a big deal because everything is for the sake of being goofy. But the series, for one, starts out, I really liked the beginning. It had very strong Toriko vibes when it was like just naming like buildings. It was like the Demon King's Palace, the Ogre Island in the sky, and it's just gonna bring up these mystical, magical, hyper-end places, which again I like because it has a good point. Like, really think of any time in a series where you have some magnificent level, some realm of absurd quality, any like massive boss battles. So even thinking of something like you know, Olympus, like the gods have their own buildings, or even like high-level boss raids, or, you know, anything. Somebody made that. There was a builder behind that. And I really like that concept in general because it means that it applies already to both sides. There's going to be builders of like very strong good and then very strong evil. Who made, you know, this fortress who's like the last bastion of humanity in this area against this evil monster king who also has his own like crazy castle. Who made his? Like, there's all these different things that I think are gonna really pan out as long as the series survives. And that's obviously the thing that we have to kind of like look at. There's always the possibility when it comes to the series and Shonen Jump that they could get axed. I'm gonna be pushing for this series because I know if it can get in the long run, it can survive the axe, and we're in for a treat. We're in for an adventure. So, like, it starts out again already like we're cool design, Hammer Island, very basic kind of concept, but cool. It's just like this very large, like mountain or mountainous kind of island that looks like a hammer smashed in. So it already got like a cool shape. You see the monsters on it, these volcanoes going on, and then you meet the main character who's got like this raggedy house. I kind of like the shift in this more than the one shot. Like the one shot was cool. I'd say I like the main character in the one shot's design a little bit more because I really liked how he had essentially steel wire hair. Just because I thought that was a neat thing, but I really like I think it's, what's his name, Tonkachi's hammer in this. That is something I really like, and I'll get to that. And like, there were some panels that I could have easily used over this one, but I really like the hammer. I really like the hammer, and I'll go over why when I get to this scene. But like, the chapter starts out, the difference between the one shot is he was a really, like, the main character Kugi he was already a very good carpenter. He already could build really nice houses, whereas Tonkachi in this one builds very crappy houses. Like, it starts out, he builds a house, it looks very rickety and raggedy. It's like just this very unfortunate shed. You have these guys called the House Eaters that show up that pretty much blow it away. You know, just nice callback to like the Big Bad Wolf. I thought that was nice. But after he gets his house destroyed, he's just upset. He's just rolling away from them. He's not taking it too seriously. And that was one of the things in this chapter, again, that was nice, is there were no signs of danger from Tonkachi. Like, well, I'm just gonna call him Tonk. I like also that he has a name. He has a nickname in his name in chapter 1 that already fits him. Like, he just seems kind of muscly already. Like, if you've read the whole chapter, I like that his name. If you just called him Tonk, it would fit well with him. But he goes inside of this guy, Renga. He calls him his brother. Like, Tonkaichi is referred to as the older brother. Even though Renga is taller, but I guess that because, you go with like the more of, oh, Tonk is older, so he's gonna be going with it. Even if you wanted to call him, even if you didn't want to call him Tonk, you wanted to call him Tonka, it fits. It just seems like a name that would go with him, and I like that a lot already. But he goes in this house, you see like the house eaters try really hard to go at Renga's house. It's not successful. You can tell like it's some form of metal, like it's just hitting it, doing nothing, and then it goes away. I think that the fact that we had the panels just showing like not the dialogue of the characters, but it would pan over to the monsters trying to break the houses and not doing anything. I think that was important to the setting of the story, because it shows them like him hit it, nothing, them all hitting it, nothing, and then they kind of just get bored and leave. And I think that really showcased what the kind of theme that the whole house thing in the series was doing from the start. That it's not just, oh, it's a house, you're building a house to sell so someone will live there. They're the human bastions against these monsters, and really just showing them, showing one of them, a couple of them rather, going at them, and then getting bored because they figured out like they weren't gonna get in. Like attacking was futile, and then walking away. I thought that was actually really cool in general. But then like we get a lot of other stuff, like we see them meeting like their mentor, this guy named Shovel, and like we see a couple of the other big deal buildings within the series, like this cool upside down pyramid. You have this building in the clouds. I do really like the castle on top of like some big turtle monster. The mountain range condos is so Shimabukuro, just some over-the-top gigantic sized building like that. Like literally it goes up to the clouds. It's literally just this massive wall from the ground level to the clouds of condos, and it's such a move by him when you see these other legendary buildings, and that's something that's legendary because it's so over the top. I love that a lot. But you get some nice foreshadowing in there about like the boss of the house eaters, and then at the end of the story talking about them breaks out, and they're like talking about how they need to be able to build a house that can withstand being attacked by this guy, and he was gonna send somebody to come get them in 2 years. It's been 3 years, so I was guessing, oh well, they have to beat the house eater boss before like this, really they can meet the criteria of getting out. And he ends up busting out at the at that point. It took him 3 years to get out of this Shovel dude's like casual cage that he made. That's nothing fancy. It's literally just a cage that's barely bigger than it. Kept him in there for 3 years. Again, 3 years, pretty crazy. Just off the top of just feats in general for this guy already. But then like the monster gets out, trouble ensues. I think that, like, for the most part, the conflict and resolution of this chapter was pretty standard, but I think that the main character, the world setting, and the, the cheating that you get pre-experience of the mangaka beforehand to add on to this, that makes it really unique and really fun. Like, when they find out, like, the stuff, like, oh, the boss of the House Eaters broke out, and he's causing havoc, and Tonka like just springs into battle. He runs. We see a little bit of what he's going to be capable for his fighting abilities, which again, I'll summarize it now. In terms in that area, I think it is important when you have a series that's obviously going to have a lot of battles and action. I do think it's actually really important for the main character to have an interesting ability or just interesting way of fighting. If they're boring, then it's like you're going to be stuck with this character for a while. As long as the character, because the main character is really important. And I do think that, when you flesh out characters later on, I think that's really important when you get like to a point where with the characters to see where they grow and where they change. But chapter 1, and like, cause like the powers and stuff that you get of the characters, generally you get introduced to in the very beginning. And I think that it's important to, it's a very important role in hooking the reader. because the main character has to have something interesting about them at the start in order to keep you reading. If it's not going to be some crazy twist that just completely blows your mind, then I think it just has to be something really interesting to you know, just how they go about their business. And I liked the hammer that Tonka has a lot. I thought that was really cool in general, just because, one, it looks very straightforward. It's nothing crazy in design, but it has a very interesting design trait to it. But also it just looks cool. It just looks like it's going to be cool to see him fight people with it. And then how he moves with it. It reminds me of kind of like how Thor in Marvel, how they get him to fly, how they kind of like have him manipulate, like he's spinning the weight of Mjolnir and then pretty much has the weight direct him in one area, like just one direction, and the weight pulls him there. It's not like straight up the same as him flying there. He's essentially being carried by the weight. And here we see Tonka not like power jumping because he's very physically strong. We see him kind of do this kind of like barrel, like just straightforward, like pressed roll getting places. Like he hits his hammer at the ground and then he uses the force to propel himself, and then each time he's getting closer to the ground, he's timing the hit to where it springs him forward even further. And I thought that was really cool because it gives him this very free range level of way of travel. Like it's not like, oh, a mountain, I have to climb up there. No, it's like, okay, I can look for areas and hit my way up there. I thought that was really cool. I thought that was just a really neat thing. Like you literally see him smash his way to moving around the island. I thought that was really neat, and it also it foreshadowed both his, like, the level of skill he has, while also showing his level of strength, while also showing this tool. And I thought that, and it showed his creativity, which I thought was really, really neat. And we find out more about why that is, like in this chapter. Like we see he finds Renga. Renga's house is destroyed. And one thing early in the chapter is like when he went to Renga, like his house, like Tonka's house was destroyed. He went to Renga. We see between them, Tonka right now isn't too good at building houses. He can barely kind of get one to hold together. Whereas Renga seems to be like kind of on the way of being able to make some pretty good houses. Like the lower level house eaters couldn't destroy it, couldn't even put a scratch on his house. Whereas the boss of them was able to completely demolish it. So you see somewhat of like the gap between like the characters and their skills. Like this other guy, Renga, could easily eventually become powerful, whereas Tonka could become able to actually build these houses. And I think that was really cool to give him a struggle at the start that, you know, still wasn't as detrimental, because like they can work well off of each other, and that definitely showed in this chapter. Because there's like a point where you'd think early in the chapter that Tonka always going to take refuge into Renga's houses because his houses get destroyed, as like, oh, he's probably a little bit you can probably you know, get on your nerves maybe a little bit because he's always depending on you. And this actually really reminded me of chapter 1 of Black Clover, how it made it seem like Asta was a problem to Yuno, and it kind of had that like, it made it seem like it was going to have Naruto and Sasuke vibes, where it was the exact opposite, where it was like, no, Yuno was upset because he thought it didn't make sense that Asta didn't get a grimoire because he actually respects him. And in my mind, I was like, oh, well, Tonka's probably a bit of a hindrance because he always has to get help from Renga in order to kind of just live on the island and be safe. But it's no, he's physically very strong. He is able to fight off these monsters by himself. He doesn't need a house on this island, so he never really had to get too good at building houses. Like, he became the one to fight back the monsters, whereas Renga became the one to build the houses. And he mentions, like, he always knew that the reason that Tonka showed up to his houses wasn't really to take refuge, because he never needed refuge. He was worried about his brother. He was always like worried about him. And Tonka even mentions, like, you know, when talking to him, and he's like, what can you possibly build? He's like, as for me, I can build peace, because he, like, showing here, is the strongest man on the island. So relatively, as long as he's able to defeat all the monsters, the peace is safe. Because if the House Eater boss is the strongest opponent, like, on this island, the one that is the biggest calamity, he can say, like, no, you're not going to do what you're going to do. I'm in charge now. There's not going to be any of these things. Because think about it. The humans are fighting back against all these monsters and calamities, but if you have somebody strong enough to defeat them all, then the kind of like hiding in your houses isn't going to be isn't going to be like as needed, because then the world itself you can live in, which again, that's really cool because it means Tonka can create a world where you feel safe outside of your home. I thought that was really cool already to be in the series. And then I think I've gone over essentially a lot of like the potential of this character and the series. Like at the end, like, you know, he defeats the bad guy. Like, you know, I don't think anybody saw the villain in chapter 1 was going to be a threat. And then at the end, like the ship for their master, Shovel, is coming to get them. And, you know, okay, we're going to see the journey start out. But the last thing I really wanted to talk to, because I've mentioned, I think, a lot of what I find interesting, and we're only in chapter 1, so it's not like we're going to get a ton of stuff to go over. But I've mentioned about the main character. I like his design, I like his name, I like his personality already. I really like his whole building peace thing. But I want to talk about his weapon, because I mentioned earlier, I do think main characters' powers and weapons are important. And I really like the fact that his weapon, like the way he describes it, is he got it from his master. He got it from Shovel. And the weapon itself, like, is powered by his vitality. So the stronger he becomes, the stronger the hammer becomes. And he says the longer the rod, the greater its power. And then we see like how it is normally. Like when he first takes it out, it just kind of like the handle and the, you know, the hammer end. Then he presses the button and it goes to its standard length that we see, like when he goes to hopping around from cliffs and stuff. And then we see what it's like when he actually puts some effort into it, and it goes to 10 meters. And then he goes and has some big swing, and we see its power that he's able to, you know, perform with it. So one, I think that's cool in general. I think that's already really cool because it's a very basic looking hammer, but it holds a great potential. And again, I think that's really cool to have something like that early on, because it gives the main character something like very iconic to him. It gives us an understanding and something to scale off of. Like later, if we see it like, oh, it's 30 meters now, it's like, oh, he's gotten 3 times stronger. We're able to gauge, you know, how much the growth of the main character has in his strength and his journey in terms of that, based off of the length of this weapon by itself, which again, I think is cool. I like that a lot. I like that he has something that is like, again, already iconic to him, and the fact they can scale means that unless it's broken or upgraded, he's gonna always have this with him. If it gets broken, I'd hope it gets replaced, because there's that sad feeling when a main character who has a very iconic tool or weapon is lost and never really kind of part of him again. Like if it's like something like Ichigo Zangetsu, it breaks and you get a different version, or it gets upgraded or something, that's different. But there's like, you know, if you like look back at like Dragon Ball, and you look at Goku back when he had the Power Pole, when he had the Nyoibo, and then he just stops using it, I've always felt like that was just a sad thing, because it was something so tied to his character up before Dragon Ball, like the time skip where obviously what's more known as Dragon Ball Z happens. It was always sad when he loses like the Nimbus and the Power Pole, because they were so iconic to his character. You know, it's not the same thing, but it's one of those things. Every time I think about Hunter x Hunter, I'm always like, man, I wish Gon kept his fishing pole. I always really liked it. I always thought it was a neat kind of like unique way that he would fight, and I'm hyped to see this, because hammers, you're not really gonna see many main characters use a hammer. Usually when they use weapons, they use swords. It could be, and they're generally have their katanas. Maybe sometimes you'll get like a double-edged blade or something, but a hammer, very, very rare. You very rarely get stuff like this. Like axes and hammers and stuff, very rarely used by main characters. So I think that unique standout thing on top of that as well is going to be really fun. So I look forward to this. I'm going to be definitely pushing this series. I've always really liked this mangaka. I always really liked his works. I think he's really fun, and I can't wait for more. So other than that, though, comment below. Tell me your thoughts are about this, and tell me your thoughts are about if you've read Toriko. I love Toriko. I always, like, whenever I think about like a manga I really need to buy more volumes for, Toriko's definitely on there for me. I love Toriko. It was always a shame to see what happened to its anime. I'm hoping Build King does well. I don't mean it has to go on like as long as Toriko, or it even has to be like some super long series. I'm just really hoping it makes to the axe, because I remember when Toriko ended. I remember how much fun it was when Toriko was airing. And I remember when this one shot came out. That's another thing, just like last second notice. I remember when this one shot came out. I remember where I was. I remember it was near like I was at work. It was back when I was like just kind of bored. It was I think I was getting ready to get out of work, and I was like, I had like an hour or so left, and I was like, I really want to read this chapter, and I snuck off to go read it, and it was I remember like I was so hyped about it. It looked so fun, and I can't wait to see how this all pans out. Fingers crossed on it not getting axed. I'm hoping to get some more people to read it, and again, I'm hyped. I think you can tell I'm hyped. Like this isn't like the standard one shot high potential. I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun. I know I'm gonna like it. I just need the gotta make sure the series survives. So look forward to that. Check out my other videos, comment below, and I really appreciate thumbs up, leave a friend, the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. From that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.